All right, in this video, I'm going to compare the SRX4 Gen 3 and the SRX4. We're going to cover the front end, the main chassis, and the rear end. Starting here up front, the newer SRX4 Gen 3 does have a different shock tower, differential, hub end than the previous generation, but overall they're very similar. They both use a composite shock tower or carbon fiber shock tower. They use the same arms. The arms are the same, so if you have old arms or spares, the hubs, so all this out here on the outboard, are different. So the axles are different. These are 82 millimeter, these are 81 millimeter. You could probably use the same. However, inside they're captured differently. In the new Gen 3, you use the ring that holds it around. And then on the first generation, the CVD is held inside the bearing, so the bearing prevents the pin from coming out. Other kind of changes are the camber links are different. So while the rods are the same, the ball cup ends are different. I did like these more than what was on the SRX2 and even on the SDX4, but I don't think they're as good as this style that are on the new Gen 3 buggies. We're still using, plastic nuts on the shock towers. That's the same. I believe these sway bar parts are the same between the two buggies. The rear end are different. The rear is the same, right? The same as the Gen 2 or Gen 3. Sway bars and the links and everything, they're the same. But I believe as the front ends are very similar. So all these parts that hold that on are the same, since the arms are the same, all those are the same, but I'm not sure if the sway bars are any wider or different. I'll find out, and I'll put in the video below if they're the same part number. Overall, the front end, very similar, very good, very solid. Steering racks are different, but overall kind of same design. On the first gen, you can see you have this 90 that it held it, and it was connected directly here. Where on the new style, you have a camber link that goes all the way across and connects to the arms. But see how that ends up being. This on the SRX4, the first generation, it was a very tight rack. It was a very good rack. I did like it. I had no issues with it. We'll see how this ends up being, since you have an extra part that can go bad, and the geometry is a little bit different. But overall, a very simple build. Comparing them. So now I'll cover the back end. Back ends are kind of similar, kind of not. They're about as similar as the differences between the SRX2s, the first mid hybrids, and the Gen 3s. So on the SRX4, it used kind of a T-plate style or older style rear end, where you had inserts and all that stuff, but this was different than what was on the SRX2 mid hybrid. On the Gen 3, it's nearly identical to the two-wheel drive buggy. The hubs, all this on the outboard is the same, the arms are the same, the sway bars are the same, the rear camber link is the same, shock tower, differential, everything is the same. So you can, if you like the back end of your two-wheel drive, you can use it here, use the same settings and same adjustments on the Gen 3. On the original SRX4, it is different. It uses the older style hubs, older style axles and everything. These are 66 mil axles, and the new one is 66. So chances are the axles are exactly the same. The axles should fit side by side, which means if you wanted, you could put the newer stuff on your old buggy if you didn't want to upgrade. But I think that the Gen 3 buggies are an improvement over the previous generation. So looking back here, the D block was plastic and the C block was aluminum. On this new buggy, both the C and D blocks are aluminum, with the options for the brass, narrow, mid, and wide. I don't know how many adjustments or how many blocks are available for the original SRX4. So shocks, again, they're mounted on the front. If you I believe you could, if you wanted to mount them on the rear, you'd have to get the longer standoffs and the different shock tower or wing mounts. Here on the Gen 3, it is the same. You move the shock tower from the front to the rear, or literally you could just unbolt it, flip it, and then you just have to swap your wing mounts, and you could run the shocks to the rear. For the most part, you're not really running the shocks on the rear. That's just how it's been. Tracks really no longer need it because there's so much average grip. The tracks, the tires, everything's a little bit better now. So probably the biggest difference, and that you'll notice, is going to be in the middle of the two buggies. So here on the SRX4 Gen 3, your motor turns a pinion, which turns a spur gear. In the Gen 3, the spur gear is attached directly to the top shaft of the transmission. So the rear end is very rear biased. It's connected straight to the back. Shouldn't be any changes to the rear. It's very tight, very direct. Here on the first gen, your motor turned a pinion, which obviously turned the spur gear, but then the spur gear used the belt to connect it to the transmission. So it was kind of separated. You don't have that same immediate and direct connection. And then of course, that top shaft was connected inside, and you had the long belt that went to the front. So here on the Gen 3, spur gear connected directly to the top shaft for the rear transmission to a belt, and that belt is another turns another shaft which is connected to the front belt. So very rear biased, very direct. And then this is, I don't want to say mid biased, but you have some drivetrain efficiencies because now you have to have a belt driving the top shaft for the rear. So I do expect this to have a more direct feel. I haven't driven on track, but I expect it to have a more direct feel and feel tighter and more direct. Not so much drivetrain loss and friction. But this was still a good buggy. I still think it was an improvement over I thought it was better than the SRX4 shaft buggy. Now, on the SRX4, it was locked out. So your only slipper action occurred here in the top shaft. You could get the differential, or not differential, but a thrust bearing style to limit your torque to the front end. But the kits came locked out. Here on the Gen 3, the front rear bias is adjusted the same as with your slipper. So belt is connected directly to this mid shaft, I guess we'll call it, and then the mid shaft's connected directly to the front. However, the thrust bearing setup here inside is what's also going to limit your torque transfer to the front. Unfortunately, it's not separated, so as you adjust the slipper screw or nut, you're going to affect the overall torque to the front as well. So if you're slipping, you set it too soft, you're also going to set this too soft to the front. So, but you're going to have that direct in the rear, so you still have plenty of bite. Another big difference here is the belt is open. As you can see, the belt is open in the front. That's why I guess in your body, the only holes I have are for the body mounts, and then I guess your front and the rear. So you want to definitely make an effort to keep dirt out. You don't want to have a bunch of vent holes in there. Keep the dirt out, keep the belt good. I do like the bearings that it rides on. They're adjustable, right? As the belt tension kind of changes, it gets loosened, gets longer. You might be able to throw some washers underneath and raise those belt tensioners, but I think that's a much better design than what we have on the previous gen, which was a good design, just very complicated and took a lot of maintenance if you wanted to disassemble something. So in here, a fully enclosed belt keeps it very clean and dry. There was a rubber insert where the steering rack goes through to prevent dirt from getting inside through there. I'm sure they figured out that dirt really wasn't a problem. Now, in order to adjust the belt tension on this buggy, you had eccentrics on the front differential that could give you a low, medium, high differential height, and then a more forward for more tension or more aft for rear less tension on the drive belt. And you generally start out with it in the middle position, middle tension, and If it was too loose, then you would move it forward, and if it was too tight, you'd move it rear, and that would adjust your tension here. Now the rear did not have any sort of tension adjustment, same as on here. There's no tension adjustment, but really shouldn't loosen up on you. So this buggy was originally set up for saddle packs. That was kind of common at the time. Almost all the four-wheel buggies had saddle packs. On this buggy, if you wanted to change, what you had to do is kind of what I've shown here, and what I've done is you had to cut a hole in the chassis. You have to chop off this guy, which I haven't done yet, and you have to move a stud up here so that you can secure the battery. And then you could run a shorty on the right side, and then you put all your electronics here on the left side. That's how I was running it. I thought that was much better than the saddle pack because you had more battery capacity, and it was just a little bit more, not balanced, but it was a better install. Here on the Gen 3, that's the primary setup, is for a shorty, which leaves you the whole other side open for your servo and your electronics. So this, I think, is a much better setup than the compromise and changes you had to do the shorty on this. So the first gen did have an option chassis. You can get the kit with a carbon fiber chassis, or you can get the kit with a aluminum chassis, as shown here. This is where your servo mounted. So if you needed to pull your servo, you had to take off the side tray. Not too big of an issue, but just one more thing that